do we come from? What is the true story of humanity's history? It's very different from what we've been taught in school. There is much more to learn than what the official version of reality allows us to know, as we've discovered through the many wonderful people that we've been blessed to meet and gain knowledge and insight from over the course of the years through the research that we've done. To everybody who has been a Dragonology fan and who has written in and who's bought the book and who's just been cheering on the series and taken such an interest in it, it's really been so inspiring to be able to deliver this information to you all. And for those who are interested in purchasing Dragonology Book 1 Spellbreaker, please go to my website, dragonology.info, and you're welcome to buy an ebook version of the book there, and remind you just how spectacular this journey of discovery has been.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mel V, coming to you live on Conscious Consumer Network this Thursday evening, the 15th of February, and it's 7 p.m. here, local time in Portugal, and it's great to be with you for yet another episode of Dragonology. And we're going into episode 2 today, and of course we're going to be sticking with all the themes that have to do with the number 2 in this season 4. So it's going to be a great Dragonology, guys. So if you haven't seen any of the previous episodes, my suggestion is you go back and watch seasons 1, 2, and 3. Get familiar with this material, because a lot of it might seem pretty far advanced from someone's understanding if they haven't done the back work. Otherwise, there's many other places online you're welcome to reference source material with regards to Dragonology. And as we go through it, we will obviously be drawing in themes from previous Dragonologies that we've done. And tonight we'll be carrying on from the place we left off in episode 1 of season 4 with our themes of, well, you'll see. Starting off with the number 2, as we said, it's the second episode. We're going to really deal with all the themes, the allegories around 2, and show you in terms of the dragonological aspect how that all ties in. And we're going to be dealing with today the dragon goddesses, the feminine aspect, and of course all the related etymology and mythology surrounding the dragon goddesses and the number 2. First off, we need to understand the concept of sexuality. Okay, dragons are represented in their male and female aspect. They have distinct sexuality. They are intrinsically connected with the creation and the cycles of birth, death, rebirth, and regeneration, which, as we know, is normally only possible via a combination of the male and feminine aspect. At least birth is. And this is really what the whole sexuality element really plays into. It is within nature, is the active and passive generative principles of all life. And that is what the male and the female represent, the active and passive generative principles of creation. Now, last week, obviously, we did a lot on creation. We covered a little bit of etymology pertaining to the beginnings of humanity and creation. And, of course, we got into a little bit of etymology pertaining to words that have dragon root words that are related to specific themes. And we touched a little bit last week on, obviously, creation, generation, and that carries on with obviously dealing with the feminine aspect. But words that have dragon root words in them that are kind of related to this theme of sex, it's actually quite amazing to see how many there are. Of course, orgasm having the core and one of the most used dragon root words, and in fact the O-R-G, if you extend it like as an ogre, okay, and orgy, okay, orgasm and orgy. Orgy, of course, is used as a form of ritual and veneration of the dragon. Porn, as in pornography. Horny, sperm has the P-E-R root, as we discussed last week. And of course, we discussed the word ejaculate, and that it is etymologically cognizant with jaculus or eaculus, which is the Latin word for dragon or serpent. And of course, we'll be carrying on a little bit with the concept of birth. Now, birth, of course, to give birth is a distinctly feminine aspect, which is why it ties into what we're going to be dealing with today, as well as looking at a brand new root word group we've not yet dealt with here on Dragonology, which is the BI root word group, which is distinctly dragon in origin. The concept of duality is inextricably linked with the dragon, being capable of both good and bad. The dragon's nature is dualistic, which is why it's important for us to understand the dragon in both of its aspects, both as good and bad, both as black and white, and both as male and female. And today we're dealing with the feminine aspect, the dragon goddesses. But normally, when we talk about regeneration, sex, it's a pairing of two, of the active and passive, of the male and the female, okay? And it's interesting that when you deal with these kind of dragon-related themes, the etymology is played into it, proving that there is some validity to these theories. The word pair is a word which references a set of two. Remember, the two being one of our themes today. And of course, a pair is a set of two something which is actually regarded as a unit, as belonging together. And I use the example here of the caduceus, which is the staff of Hermes, of course, having a set or two serpents which twirl around it, a pair of serpents. The word pair is a dragon root word from the same group of words such as pear, the fruit, peer, as in a synonym to look or stare, par, which is actually with a double A, is the Dutch word for pear, para as in parable or pharaoh, per as in person, and then of course peri, we got into peri a lot last week, the French word parler, to speak, of course the dragons gave us our languages, and pearls. Dragons are inextricably linked with the concept of pearls, which are also representations of the dragon. It's interesting to note that in dragon mythology or dragonology, when you go back through different cultures across the world, you'll notice that the pairing, the two, it's a very common theme. Normally a king and queen, a he and she, a lot of love stories. I can think of Cupid and Psyche, Cadmus and Harmonia, but to name a few. But you'll find this in every culture across the world. Here is an example of the Tibetan Naga couple or the Tibetan dragon couple. You'll notice again, humanoid upper body and this classical trademark dragon or serpent's tail on both the male and the feminine representations here. And then of course this goes across the world. This is Nua and Fuxi, which is a famous dragon couple from Chinese mythology. Again, you'll notice intertwined, much like the dragons of the Caduceus, but with this telltale lower body of a serpent or a dragon. And then you have over here a Indonesian or Pali version of the dragons, also Nagas, with the interwoven tail. The dragon couple, the king and the queen, and of course you can see very distinctly Southeast Asian or Asian by the fact that they've got the naga coming above the head like that. Many serpents' heads, which of course is just indicative of the fact that they are in fact serpent or dragon deities. So you find this, as we say, this is Tibetan, this is Chinese, this is Indonesian or Indian, and just to give you an idea of this imagery is all over the world, which means that it must have some basis in reality. It's just been artistically represented in different ways depending on the culture. I mean, these two cultures' representations are very, very different in style, but ultimately representing very similar aspects. And one of the most famous of the pairing, of course, is Cadmus and Harmonia from Greek mythology. Of course, Cadmus is the king that founded the city of Thebes, a very famous city in ancient Greece, which is was really where a lot of rituals to the dragon were held. And of course, Cadmus being depicted here as a full-blown serpent, and Harmonia, also known as Hermione, in a half-female aspect with a serpent's tail, of course, intertwined again. But we're going to be taking the pair of dragons, the dragon pair, and looking at one of that pair today, which is the dragon goddesses, the feminine aspect of the dragon. The ancient theme of Mother Nature in the form of a serpent or a dragon goddess ruling over the earth and its inhabitants has been taught for thousands of years. This is not a new age concept. This has been something that has been allegorized through many mythologies and preserved in many artworks. Starting off, of course, last week we dealt with the creation and carried on a lot about the Garden of Eden, and of course the mother goddess or feminine figure to come out of the Garden of Eden, of course, being Eve. Eve is a figure in the book of Genesis, according to the creational story of the Abrahamic religions, and Abrahamic religion, of course, being Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. These are all religions that believe that Abraham was the first prophet. So according to the creational story of the Abrahamic religions, she, being Eve, was the first woman created by the gods or the dragons. The name Eve is even rooted in dragon etymology, and it's very interesting because there's two ways you can go with this. Eve, okay, Ave is an Ave Maria, referencing the Virgin Mary, can transliterate into Ava. Remember, all vowel sounds transliterate out for each other. The V transliterates for the F. In the Dutch and Germanic languages, the V is said like a phonetic sound of an English F. And of course, a PH sound or a double P in French is representative of the F in English. And of course, Afa is a word which references a viper, okay? So Eve and Afa, not too far apart from each other. And then, of course, Afa and apple, very similar to each other. But also notice the last two words of Eve, the VE, the VE. That has a word grouping which links into another interesting set of root words, which we will deal with at a later Dragonology stage, being, as we've already mentioned, viper, Venus, venom, of course, serpents put out venom, and of course the Virgin Mary, Ave Maria, which we will deal with a bit later. Lilith is an interesting character, of course, much like we have Eve here, obviously depicted with a serpent and, of course, taking the apple at the temptation of the serpent. So too do we have Lilith normally depicted wrapped in a serpent. And this is a picture by John Collier from about 1892. And Lilith, for those who don't know, is a figure in Jewish mythology, developed earliest in the Babylonian Talmud, and is often envisioned as a dangerous demon of the night who is sexually wanton and who steals babies in the darkness. In Jewish folklore, Lilith is the first wife of Adam, who was created at the same time as Adam, as opposed to Eve, who was created from Adam's rib. Lilith left Adam after she refused to be subservient to him, and then would not return to the Garden of Eden after she had coupled with the archangel Samael. And yeah, interesting, Lilith comes up again and again as well in various succubus-related imagery, that she was a demon of the night. And we'll get into the succubus a bit later. The goddess Ishtar. This is a very commonly known image of her, of course, flanked in two angels with wings and with the claws of a bird. Ishtar is the goddess of the Akkadians, the predecessors of the Sumerians. She is cognate with Astaroth of the Philippines, Isis of the Egyptians, and Inanna of the Sumerians, and of course Astarte of the Phoenicians. From the word Ishtar, we get the word Easter. Okay, and it's at Easter that we celebrate the beginning of spring, very much a feminine-based holiday. Of course, birth and fertility and all that tying into the feminine generative principle. Okay, now on to Chalchihuitlicue. Can't believe I got that right. In Aztec mythology, Chalchihuitlicue is the goddess of the lakes and streams. It's interesting to notice that they're often associated with water, these goddesses as well. She is the patron saint of births, again, births, and plays an important role in the baptism of Aztecs. Interesting to notice the water theme there again. You'll notice this comes up again and again with the feminine dragon, very much dragons that are themed with waters. The serpent goddess of Crete is one of the earliest dragon worship figurines to have been found, and certainly in this period of time. And it's a figurine which is actually done with an ancient method of glazing. So these people were very far advanced, and depicts a woman holding a serpent in each hand. And these are found in the Minoan archaeological sites on the island of Crete, which has, I must just say, that the Minoan archaeological site there has the most amazing palace at Knossos that I would really love to go visit. It's one of the few ancient depictions that you can find of a dragon actually in its therianthropic form. Then, of course, we're going to Greek mythology here with the goddess Medusa. And, of course, Medusa meaning guardian or protectress. She was a monster, a gorgon, generally described as a winged human female with living venomous serpents in place of hair. And the imagery of the gorgon Medusa turns up in many places, including on the Versace logo. And these are generally what the gorgons are depicted looking like, fearsome-looking creatures, but you'll notice always flanked in serpents. The serpents are the telltale sign that these are dragon gods. And, of course, the fangs and the tongue hanging out, all of which have symbolic allegory. But, of course, none more obvious than the appearance of the wings. Of course, wings and feathers being a distinctive serpent symbol. Here's some more winged deities wrapped in serpents. Of course, the telltale signs there that they are in fact dragons. They're called the Furies. In Greek mythology, the Furies were female chthonic deities of vengeance, sometimes referred to as infernal goddesses. They are depicted as winged and, of course, wrapped in serpents. Here's some more depictions of the Furies. You can see serpents in their hair like Medusa. Again, winged humanoid beings. And a slightly more modern depiction of them seen clutching at serpents in their hands. You can see that over here. And then, of course, there's Athena. Athena is an ancient Greek goddess of wisdom, handicraft, war, and, of course, being the patron saint of Athens. In later times, she was known under her Roman aspect as Minerva. Athena's symbols include the owl and the wearing of the aegis, a garment said to have tassels made of serpents. And here we go. Here's a depiction of the aegis, and you'll notice, of course, there's serpents coming off this garment, which in the center of the aegis is always the face of a gorgon. It's known as a gorgoneum. And again, you'll notice here are the claws, the fangs, which stick out, the tongue hanging out, and of course, if you get closer, I bet you'd see that those are actually little serpents. You can see little serpents coming down here from the hair. This is actually meant to be a picture of the Gorgon Medusa. And if you are going under the aegis of something, and it said you are protected by that thing. So Athena, obviously a goddess who was protected by the Gorgons. She was protected by the dragons, and of course herself probably being of the dragon bloodline, becoming the patron saint of Athens. And of course the name Athena has the dragon root word The, which is a root word meaning God. And of course, when we talk about the gods in dragonology, we are always talking about the dragons. Take the word The, and put it into words like theology, and you'll understand, yes, it is absolutely a study of the gods, this word. Here's some more depictions of Athena, and these are much clearer. You can see the aegis a bit clearer on this one. Definitely notice little serpent tassels hanging off in the front. You've got the face of the Gorgon Medusa. This is the Gorgonean, the center of the aegis. Again, here, this is a marble version of this cloak known as an aegis, and you'll see the face there of the Gorgon, tongue sticking out. But again, notice tassels made of serpents. So a very interesting item of clothing this. It seems to have had some kind of a lifelike quality if there were live serpents hanging from it. Okay, the oracle. In classical antiquity, an oracle was a person or an agency considered to provide wise and insightful counsel or profiting predictions or precognitions of the future inspired by the gods or the dragons. In fact, the most famous oracle was named Pythia, which is etymologically cognizant with the word python. Python, of course, being a serpent. These oracles, whether or not they're from the dragon bloodline or priestesses of the temple, which carried the messages of the dragons through, again, the concept of a messenger is very much tied in with the concept of dragonology. Of course, angels, which are in fact dragons, were known as the messengers of the god. Pegasus, for example, known as the messenger of the god. So again, oracle ties in with that theming. And staying on the Greek theme and Greek mythology, Persephone is the daughter of Zeus and the harvest goddess. And the harvest goddess is, of course, Demeter. And it's interesting because you notice that although Persephone is the daughter of Demeter, they're often depicted very, very similarly. In fact, it's easy to confuse them. The word Persephone, of course, having the key dragon root word that we've already discussed, P-E-R. Persephone is the queen of the underworld as the wife of Hades. Okay, so also a chthonic deity. The story of her abduction represents her function as the personification of vegetation, which shoots forth in spring and withdraws into the earth after harvest. And you'll notice commonly depicted again with grains of wheat, sheaths of wheat, and serpents. All right, always serpents because they are dragon goddesses. And talking about Demeter, of course, Demeter's chariot is very interesting because you'll notice Demeter's chariot always seems to be pulled by serpents. Here we go again. A winged chariot with a serpent pulling it. Very key theme when you come to understand the symbolism behind cars, because of course car comes from chariot or carriage. And then there's the goddess Artemis, also known as Diana. Artemis is one of the most widely venerated gods of Greek goddesses, her Roman equivalent being Diana, and very, very recognizable because they're often depicted with multiple breasts, indicative again of the fact that she was a creator or a mother, regeneration, birth and death, fertility. The breasts are symbolic of fertility. Here's some other depictions of them, okay, in different mediums. This looks like it could be stone, but you can see multiple breasts. Again, numerous breasts, indicative of fertility. Astarte or Ashtoreth are pretty much the same deity. Again, notice breasts showing indicative of fertility, holding serpents. Astarte is the Hellenized form of the Middle Eastern goddess Ashtaroth, a form of Ishtar. Okay, so you can see how all these goddesses actually just change names, but it's the same basic archetype. Astarte was worshipped by the ancient Levant among the Canaanites and Phoenicians. She was also celebrated in Egypt following the importation of the Levantan cults there. Astarte is commonly depicted with serpents as well, much like all the other dragon goddesses. And then, of course, there's Selene. In Greek mythology, Selene is the moon goddess. Selene is the daughter of the Titan Hyperion and Thea, and sister of the sun god Helios. Both Selene and Artemis were associated with Hecate, as all three were considered to be lunar goddesses. And of course, Selene's Roman equivalent is then Luna. And you'll notice the moon goddess has a moon above her head. Here's some more images of Selene. And you'll always notice them by the moon on their head. And we mentioned Hecate, of course, Selene being associated with Hecate. Hecate was the goddess from ancient Greek mythology, most often shown holding a pair of torches or a key, and in later periods in triple form, okay? And you'll notice as well Selene often depicted holding a torch. It's a very common depiction. And you'll notice the Statue of Liberty also depicted holding a torch. Of course, the word torch having the O-R common dragon root word because it's inextricably linked with dragon mythology. And another goddess in Greek mythology is the goddess Eos. Eos is a titan and a goddess of the dawn who rose each morning from her home at the edge of Oceanus. Eos is the sister of Selene, the moon goddess, and the sister of Helios, the sun god, and is cognate very much with the concept of Lucifer, the bringer of the light, the bringer of the dawn. Here's some more images of Eos. Very interesting to notice as well, this typical winged humanoid figure. The wings, as we've said before, very much indicative of dragon origins. Getting into more of the water themes with regards to these dragon goddesses. Here we've got Doris, who was, again, from ancient Greece and was classified as an oceanid or a sea nymph, whose name represented the bounty of the sea. She was the daughter of Oceanus and Thetis and the wife of Nereus. And you'll notice that she's often depicted riding the hippocamp. All right, the hippocampus is, of course, a horse-like being that has a dragon or serpent tail, which, of course, would be the counterpart to the flying dragon horse, which, of course, is Pegasus. Now, moving on to Asia, we have a look at the feminine aspect of the serpent or dragon god of the Naga, being the Nagi or Nagini in plural. Naga is etymologically cognizant with the word snake, both having the common Na root. Na root. And this is various depictions, of course, of the Nagini. Again, you'll notice the snakes coming above the head there, looking very friendly, happy, smiley snakes, and a serpent tail. Now, a slightly different depiction. Again, notice the wings and the serpent's tail with the serpents above the head. And then there's Nua. Nua is the mother goddess of the Chinese mythology and sister wife, okay, of Fuxi. So Nua and Fuxi were the couple that we showed you earlier, the serpent couple who were twining from Chinese mythology. Nua, of course, being the feminine of the two. And then there's Chanji, okay? Now, interesting to notice, Chanji, originally known as Henji. And this is a very interesting thing because you'll notice that even in languages that don't derive from the Latin base, such as Chinese, supposedly, you'll find the same root words that you find in the Latin-based words, which proves that all language eventually or ultimately came from one common root source, being the dragons. And the same root words are interwoven into other languages, even ones that aren't formed with the Roman script. Now, Chanji has the dragon root word A-N-G-E, which is the root of angel. And for those who know, angels are in fact serpents. Angel comes from the word anguim or angui, which are Latin words for dragon or serpent. But also, you change the A and the E around, and you got the E-N-G-E, like, for example, engel, which is the Dutch word for angel, and it's got henge, E-N-G-E. And interesting to notice that dragons were normally worshipped and rituals done to them at henges. That's what these henges are, these big stone henges that you find all over the show, were in fact temples of worship to the dragon gods. Now, going on to Egyptian religion and mythology, Isis was a major goddess in ancient Egyptian religion whose worship spread throughout the Greco-Roman world. Isis is one of the main players in the Osiris myth, in which she reconstructs or resurrects her husband, the divine king Osiris, and produces his heir, being Horus. Of course, Horus and Osiris being thought to be the same soul, just different bodies. This is an interesting depiction of Isis. It's one of the very few of Isis I found that where it shows her in a true serpentine aspect, of course being of dragon origins. And then in Egyptian religion, there's a goddess known as Wadjet, who was the patron and protector of Lower Egypt, and upon unification with Upper Egypt, the joint protector and patron of all Egyptian goddesses of Upper Egypt. She was also the protector of kings and women in childbirth. Again, the birth theme coming back up. And here's some more images of Wadjet. This is painted on a temple wall. You notice again the serpent with wings. The wings are always a symbol. There is the sun disk, also a symbol of the dragon, and the undulating dragon's tail. And here you can see the reared cobra heads of Wadjet, known as Urays, on a temple wall. And in the Egyptian religion, there is the goddess known as Maat. Maat refers to the Egyptian concept of truth, balance, order, harmony, law, morality, and justice. Maat was the goddess who personified these concepts and regulated the flow of the seasons and the stars. It is her feather against which the heart of the dead are weighed by Anubis. That's the god of judgment. Now, this is the feather of Maat. And again, wings and feathers, as I've already said, these are key dragon symbols. So whenever you see the feathers come up, you'll notice on pharaohs' crowns, they often wear ostrich feathers as well. Feathers are a key indication of the dragon bloodline. Okay, going on to Nordic mythology, the Ormhaxen is a type of snake witch which existed in Nordic mythology in the Nordic times, and of course left behind in some interesting artwork. Here is the snake witch over here. You'll notice the legs spread, indicative of distinct sexuality, and holding a snake in each hand, much like the serpent goddess of Crete. That's a very common depiction, is feminine goddess holding serpents in her hand. Here's some more depictions of the Ormhaxen witch of Nordic mythology. Interesting interpretations. And then getting onto the Catholic religion, of course, we have the Virgin Mary. Mary, of course, being the mother of Jesus, who was believed to be conceived by immaculate conception of the Holy Spirit. Interesting, these two words give clear indication to the fact that Mary, if she wasn't a dragon herself, was in fact impregnated by a dragon. Kula being a dragon root word, and of course spirit having two key dragon root words. First, SBI, same root of spiral, and spy, as in like watcher, to peer, to look, to see, all dragon root words indicative of the all-seeing eye. And of course the root word rit, indicative of ritual and writing. Okay, the dragons gave us our language and writing. Mary is often depicted standing on a moon, like the moon goddesses we've already spoken about, allegorical as of her association to pre-Catholic lunar goddesses, which of course predate her. Mary is often depicted standing on a serpent or a dragon. You'll notice the serpent here beneath the feet. And funny enough, this one happens to be depicted holding an apple with one bite out of it. Now, the apple with one bite out of it, of course, indicative of knowledge. As we've discussed in previous Dragonologies, that's the symbol of the Macintosh, is the apple, and of course indicative of the apple out of the Garden of Eden. That is why the serpent and the apple in this particular image is very, very interesting, because this is very clearly referencing the serpent in the Garden of Eden, which is clearly a dragon allegory. This is a very good picture by Peter Paul Rubens, a highly initiated artist who's done many interesting symbolism-laden artworks that I reference throughout my foray into the world of Dragonology. And here's some other images of the Virgin Mary. Again, very much the same thing. Here's another one of her. This time you can actually see the moon that she's standing on, indicative of the lunar goddess. Here is another serpent with like being. This one's got a bit of a dragon, more dragon head, and of course holding an apple. And here are more dragon-looking ones, but these are kings, of course. Royalty, the royalty theme always inextricably associated with dragons. Of course, kings and royalty and rulers of the world are said to be dragons. And here you can see the crowns on them, so human-like faces with crowns indicative of royalty. And Mary standing on them again. You can check the moon behind her there. The Mary is often associated with the goddess Sophia, who is known as the goddess of wisdom. In fact, the word Sophia contains the dragon root word ophi, a very common dragon root word present in words like ophiolatry, which is dragon worship, or Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer, the constellation of the serpent bearer. So here's a picture of Sophia in the ruins of the library in Ephesus, which is a ruined city in Turkey, which I have in fact visited. Talking about Turkey, there's an amazing cathedral, one of the most beautiful cathedrals I've ever been in, called the Hagia Sophia. And if you haven't visited it, you must do. It was converted into a mosque when Istanbul became Constantinople, and then was taken over by the Moors at a later stage. The minarets were added, but originally this was a Justinian Catholic cathedral, beautifully made, and of course named after the goddess Sophia. And here inside of this particular cathedral is what remains on the wall of the goddess Sophia with the wings, I beg your pardon. and of course holding an orb, which if you read my book, you understand what the orbs are indicative of. Moving on to literature. This looks like 16th or 17th century literature because, of course, we're dealing with the works of the individual who wrote under the name of William Shakespeare. Of course, my theory, and I very much am backing the idea that he was, in fact, royalty. In the film Anonymous, he is said to be Edward de Vere, Vere being an ancient dragon bloodline. Edward de Vere, the 16th or 18th Earl of Oxford, who was, in fact, the real author that wrote under the name William Shakespeare. And of course, one of his amazing plays, one of my favorites being Hamlet, stars a key heroine figure who actually commits suicide. And suicide is symbolic of self-sacrifice or self-immolation. And her name was Ophelia. And Ophelia is interesting because, of course, much like Sophia, it's got that key dragon root word, the Ophi dragon root word, of course. In Sophia, we've got the I, and in Ophelia, we've got the E. The I and the E being vowel sounds, they transliterate out for each other. Another beautiful image by John William Waterhouse of Ophelia. Notice again, mother goddesses are commonly depicted with red hair. And then we go into sort of more cult-like aspects of the mother goddess allegories, that of, for example, Santa Muerte, also known as Our Lady of Death or Holy Death. Santa Muerte is a female deity or folk saint and is commemorated over Halloween, and of course with All Saints Day, which is the day after Halloween, which Halloween is the eve before All Saints Eve. And lots of allegories there. We've got into Halloween in quite some detail in the past, but this is a time when Santa Muerte is venerated, a skeletal feminine figure clothed as the Virgin Mary, and of course decorated very much the same. You'll notice she's standing on a moon, of course got the aureola around her like many images of Mary, except this is not celebrating the light aspect, the birth and regeneration. This is celebrating the death aspect, a part of that eternal cycle. And here are some more representations of Santa Muerte, often depicted holding this harvest skiff because, of course, Halloween is a harvest time ritual, which is why you'll notice there's always pumpkins in Halloween symbolism. As we mentioned earlier, talking about the goddess Lilith, often referenced as a succubus, the succubus is a Lilin demon in female form, or a supernatural entity in folklore that appears in dreams and takes on a woman form to seduce men, usually through sexual activity. The male counterpart is the incubus, and of course, C-U-B-U being key dragon root words. Often it's said that the succubus is the equivalent of a vampire, because of course what do vampires do? They suck the blood of their victims. Succubus, that's where the word suck comes from. And then of course there is the concept of the fairy godmother. The fairy godmother plays the role of a guardian spirit. And this of course when we get into modern day fairy tales and what gets interpreted by Disney as just harmless fairy tales for children, but absolutely laden in multi-layered dragon allegory that most children just do not understand. But the fairy godmother turns up again and again in various incarnations in Disney films. For example, in Sleeping Beauty, we have the 3 fairy godmothers, and of course, the most recent rendering of the fairy godmother theme being Maleficent. And you'll notice again, big wings. This is obviously the darker aspect with horns, probably closer to the true nature of the dragons than, say, these 3 little sweet dears. And of course, much like the concept of the guardian, which is what a fairy godmother is, in Roman religion, a genius loci was a protective entity or guardian. It was depicted in religious iconography as a figure holding attributes such as a serpent. Okay, so places that were protected were obviously depicted with serpents in their symbolism. You can see here, Genio Loci. This is a sacred place, most likely a sacred grove. As we spoke about last week, groves were very important. In fact, Perseus said, I won't read the Latin of this, but the meaning being paint 2 serpents and the place is sacred. All right, so if you paint 2 serpents on it, as we've already spoken about, 2 serpents, the number 2 being our key theme today, dealing with pairs and duality. If you paint 2 serpents on it, the place is sacred. Now, going into language that many may have heard of, that people may have heard of what is known as the watchers which turn up in the Bible. The watchers, of course, are another word for a guardian. If you're guarding something, you might be seen to be watching it. Of course, the word peer comes from dragon root words, as does the word spy, as we've already spoken about. And of course, what do you spy with? I spy with my eye. All right, all-seeing eye. And Latin word for eye is oculus, okay? And then occult means that which is hidden from sight, that which we cannot see, the hidden. That is the meaning of the occult. But what's interesting to notice is that the watchers are often depicted with eyes in their artwork. This is a dragon depiction from the mid-19th century. And you'll notice it's a wood cutting with eyes in the wings. And that's actually a more honest representation of what a dragon really looks like, because any sort of sweetie, glamorized angelic versions of the dragon, don't worry, they put the same symbolism in there. They just obviously don't make the dragons look quite as fierce as this. But you'll notice again, the eyes turn up in the wings. This is a seraphim angel. You notice the seraphim is always depicted with 6 wings and, of course, eyes, and all the wings indicative of the watchers. And this eye symbolism turns up again in the form of the all-seeing eye on the back of the $1 bill. And, of course, you'll often find it inside Roman Catholic churches, indicative of the fact that they are under the subservientship of the watchers. The watchers, of course, being made famous in artworks, many people may recognize this pair of cherubs, which seem to be pretty harmless. Look how cute and childlike they are. Notice again the wings, which are symbolic of their dragon origins, of their true dragon lineage. But notice they're both looking distinctly in the same direction. They're both watching. And if you know the full scale of this picture, you'll notice that the cherubs are actually at the bottom of the picture watching all the action happen up here. Okay, so these 2 cherubs are clearly indicative of the watchers. It's clear what they're doing. They're watching something. They're definitely, sitting there staring and checking something out. Moving on slightly to Greek and Roman mythology again, where we are faced with yet another dragon-like, a dragon allegorical being the harpy. Now, the harpy was a half-woman, half-bird personification of storm winds, having been described as human vultures. Okay, not very clear here, but you can see like a woman's face and bird-like bodies. But more clearly depicted here in this old picture, with a woman's face, clearly feminine with long hair, bird-like body, and of course ever indicative of the royal allegory, of course, kings and queens being shape-shifting dragons. Here we have a harpy with a female's head on it in a coat of arms with a crown on, okay, indicative of royalty. And of course, as we say, the kings and queens of the world are in fact dragons. Queen Elizabeth I in this picture is depicted holding a serpent, which was later painted over with flowers to hide her dragon lineage. And here we have it. Here's the hand that's holding a bunch of flowers, but the white paint on the flowers is actually faded to reveal the much darker serpent underneath. And you can see the serpent kind of goes over her hand there, which has been painted over with flesh-colored paint. But you'll notice that the paint is starting to fade away. And if you actually have a look at this area here where the hand is, that is what it would have looked like in its original form. Okay, that's an artistic interpretation of what that serpent over there looked like. But they clearly put some flowers over it because they wanted to hide this. So the queen is clearly hiding her dragon origins in this picture, 16th century depiction. And same queen, this is Queen Elizabeth I, known as the Virgin Queen, or the Dragon Queen. The rainbow portrait attributed to Marcus Gerhards the Younger from about 1600 has one of the most interesting sets of symbolism with regards to the Virgin Queen. Firstly, this is the full picture over here. There's a number of allegorical pieces. First, obviously, the serpent holding the apple in its mouth. We've already discussed the allegory towards that of the Garden of Eden. It turns up under the Virgin Mary in several pictures, but woven into the garments that she is wearing. And then, of course, you'll notice the eyes and the ears. They see all and they hear all. They know everything. These are the watchers. Okay, you'll see the eyes, eye symbolism in the fabric of the garment. And of course, pearls. We mentioned already the word pearl, rooted in dragon etymology and symbolic of the dragon. More pictures here of modern-day Queen Elizabeth II in these Commonwealth Games stamps depicted with the dragon in all of them. Okay, it's I mean, why would you have the dragon put there unless there was some bigger allegory? These people don't do the things for nothing. There's definitely much deeper root symbolism to take into account here when they use dragons on things like postal stamps. It's because they are dragons. Many eyewitnesses have given accounts of Queen Elizabeth II being a shape-shifting dragon that consumes children at rituals. And this, of course, being the mock-up artwork that goes around about this sort of imagery. And Queen Elizabeth, of course, being descended from this lady here, Queen Melusine, who spawned the Angevin dynasty. The Plantagenets obviously come from her bloodline as well. And the Queen being descended from the Plantagenets. Queen Elizabeth II, of course, descended from Queen Melusine, who is depicted as a nymph or siren with her two serpent-like or tail, fishy-like legs, often mistaken as a mermaid, but she is in fact a dragon. And Melusine is the Starbuck siren. So you'll see here again the siren holding her two serpent tails. You notice wearing a crown, holding the two serpent tails. Here again, holding a crown and holding the serpent tails. So she is the siren of the Starbucks logo. And in much older images of Queen Melusine, this is from the 15th century, you'll notice that she's actually depicted with a single serpent's tail with wings. And this image is very famous. It's known as Queen Melusine's Secret Discovered. And this is, of course, when her husband discovers that she is, in fact, half human, half dragon, or that she is of the dragon bloodline. And then, of course, the siren, which Melusine is named as being, is a Greek figure. In Greek mythology, the sirens were a dangerous creature who lured sailors to their death with enchanting music, often depicted again as winged beings with feet, very much like the harpies. And of course, this is the story of Odysseus and the sirens. And the feminine aspect in dragon mythology, the feminine counterpart to the dragon is the phoenix. Phoenix, the mythological bird from Greek mythology, and is said to be the feminine counterpart of the dragon, the yin and the yang. Associated with the sun, a phoenix obtains new life by arising from the ashes of its predecessor. The phoenix dies in a show of flames and combustion, much like we've spoken about the rebirth cycle, the birth, death, and rebirth cycle that we saw with Osiris and Horus, and that comes up again and again. The theme is indicative here, yet again, with the phoenix, which is a sacred bird. In fact, the yin and the yang in Chinese philosophy describe how seemingly opposites and contrary forces may actually be complementary, interconnected, and interdependent in the natural world, and how they may give rise to each other as they interrelate to one another. Many tangible dualities exist, such as light and dark, fire and water, positive and negative, male and female, active and passive. Of course, here being the phoenix, here being the dragon, interconnecting. These are the active and passive generative principles of creation, without which nothing would exist. Okay, in Dragonology, we let the language and symbols be our guide. So we're going to get into a little bit of that today, looking at some, of course, related etymology. This is a new route we've not explored before. So this is going to be interesting new ground for those who are following along in the series. So this being the second episode, as we say, we stick around all things to do with duality and two. But another word for two is bi, as in bicycle. Bicycle is called a bicycle because it's got two wheels. A tricycle has three wheels. Bisexual, you're not just attracted to one sex, you're attracted to two sexes. That means you're bisexual. You'll be attracted to both men and women. Biathlon is, of course, where you do two disciplines, perhaps running and swimming, or running and cycling. Whereas a triathlon is where you do three athletic disciplines, such as perhaps running, swimming, and cycling. That is what a triathlon is. But a biathlon is where you have two disciplines in a marathon. So let's look at the word bi, the dragon root word bi, and where it turns up in some interesting places. And of course, we will go there and decompose and deconstruct and decipher all of this. First off, as we mentioned again and again, the word birth. Birth inextricably linked with the themes of the feminine aspect. Only women, of course, can bear children. Bible, bird, ibis, big, bishop, bison, bision or bisa, and Anubis. Right, let's have a look at some of these concepts to see why they tie into dragonology. But first, we have a look at when you transliterate the vowel sounds around, you also get some other interesting dragon-related words. For example, boa, as in a boa constrictor, a python, a beast, as in Beauty and the Beast, of course, a shape-shifting entity, basilisk, known as the king of serpents, business, Byzantine, obelisk, believe, and baby. Okay, let's have a look at where these words turn up. The bison. Sure, probably one of the most telling images I've ever come across that there is such a thing as dragons and they do consume humans is this image of the bison. The bison is the dragon that is consuming a child as a logo. This is actually the logo of the House of Visconti in Italy, a papal royal black nobility bloodline family. And of course, it turns up in the Alfa Romeo logo. And you can see here it is eating a human. Of course, it's time to depict it with a crown. So for those who want to know a little bit more of the Alfa Romeo logo and all the allegories pertaining to it, feel free to check out my book. It's all in there. Of course, the bison turns up in some interesting places. The depiction of the bison swallowing a child is the coat of arms of the House of Visconti. And of course, it appears on the Archbishop's Palace in Piazza Duomo in Milan, Italy. Notice that. Okay. On the Bishop's Palace. This is the B-I-S, like the bison, bishops, the Archbishop's Palace. So there is that root again. And of course, BIS refers to bison. Bison is a taurian or a buffalo type creature with horns. And of course, horns, if already mentioned, is a key dragon root word. Often these deities are depicted with horns, such as Pan or Moloch. Bull gods turn up commonly in dragonology as representatives of dragons. This is, of course, a sacred bull in India. And of course, the Canaanite god, to which they sacrifice children, which of course being Moloch with the horns. And of course there is depictions of the sacred bull being Apis in Egyptian mythology as well. Notice the horns holding the sun disk, and you can always tell that they're representative of royalty by these, which are actually indicative of feathers. These are feathers above their head. Feathers, of course, a sign of the royal dragon bloodline. Then the word big. Okay, the word big is very interesting, of course, because it's got the B-I and then the key root word, key letter G. For those who want to know more about G, please go check out episode 1 of season 4 and see why G is so important. But what's interesting to notice is that the word big is a synonym for gigantic or gargantuan. Okay, and when you've got the double G, okay, the word is even more important. Other words that are synonyms for G include colossal, and colossal has the colo root word from the colo, kula root. And then, of course, it's titanic, like if it's big, it's titanic, indicative of the Titans, okay? The Titans, of course, being nothing more than dragons. And, of course, if it's big, it's king size. And, of course, kings, rulers, royalty are themes which always tie into the dragon. And this is an artwork of Gargantes, a Greek mythological character who was always depicted with serpents for legs, this of course being a mosaic. But here's some more images of Gargantes in a frieze, a Roman frieze in marble, and you'll see serpent legs. There's a serpent head, okay? And here is an image of Abraxas, said to be taught in Gnosticism to be the top head lead god of all of the gods, supposedly. But of course, again, nothing but a dragon. Depicted with the head of a cockatrice, much like some images of the basilisk, and legs being serpents. Very interesting. And of course, the sun and the moon symbolism turn up there again, indicative of the duality, light and the dark. And then we've got bird, having the BI root. And of course, Horus is a representation of a peregrine falcon. A falcon, of course, being a bird. Of course, birds have wings. Wings and feathers are dragons' symbols. Other birds which are symbolic of the dragon include the dove, the owl, the swan, the eagle, and of course, you already dealt with the phoenix, and of course, the ibis. Okay, you'll notice a lot of these images or these birds are used as symbolism to mask the true nature of the dragon. Now, going on to the ibis, Thoth was one of the key founding deities of the Egyptian mystery religion and culture, and of course, Thoth is often depicted with the head of an ibis. Okay. Thoth is also known by the name Jehuti, which has the key dragon root DJ, J, which is the phonetic, in English phonetically goes J, as in the letter G, but is also depicted as the resting cobra or resting serpent in the hieroglyphics of ancient Egypt. Anyway, Thoth or Jehuti is often depicted with the head of an ibis, and his feminine counterpart was Sheshat, and his wife was Mart. We've already spoken about Mart. Of course, Mart having the feather under which Anubis measured the heart of the dead. Talking about Anubis, Anubis is often depicted with the head of an African golden wolf. Many think it's a jackal, but it is in fact a wolf. But notice Anubis again. Of course, he's the one who takes the feather of Mart and makes judgment against a person by weighing it against their heart in the underworld. Anubis, the eye over there. And then, of course, we get on to the bishop. The Catholic Church wouldn't be complete without their fair share of dragon etymology. A bishop is an ordained or consecrated or appointed member of the Christian clergy who is generally entrusted with a position of authority and oversight. And then, of course, there is the Bible. The Bible is a collection of sacred texts or scriptures or books that Jews and Christians consider to be a product of divine inspiration and a record of the relationship between humans and the gods or the dragons. Of course, the word Bible comes from the word bibloi, which means books. That's why we have a bibliotheek, which is the Dutch word for library. It's a place where books are kept. And the B-I is in the root of Bible. And then, of course, we've mentioned already, the birth theme keeps coming up, dealing with the feminine aspect. The birth, B-I, goes into birth. And to have a child is a distinctly feminine attribute. Of course, the conception of a child normally comes with the contribution of a man, but giving birth to a child is distinctly feminine. It's a feminine attribute. Okay, that's it for me, guys. Please do check out my work. I've got a wonderful documentary called Secrets of the Kalahari. Learn about the oldest dragon ritual worship site that dates back over 70,000 years. The documentary film is available at our website, dragonology.info. Please follow us on Facebook. Check out our Facebook page. Like, follow, and keep up to date with everything that's going on. We, of course, announce the broadcasts on this page as well as on my homepage on Facebook. And we let everybody know when the archives are up. Because we have now started uploading the archives to our Dragonology website, which has become a private members association in order to protect the data of all the users. For those who sign up, you don't have to pay anything to be a member, but you will receive newsletters. And of course, as I said, we will obviously look after your data and keep your identity secret as part of the Dragonology Private Members Association. From this website, you can collect a copy of my book, Dragonology Book 1 Spellbreaker. And it goes through everything you need to know to get up to speed with regards to where we are now with our lectures into Dragonology. And of course, we broadcast Dragonology live on Conscious Consumer Network TV, which is a publicly funded network. Please, guys, support independent media by donating to our 2018 funding campaign. And that's it from me, Mel V. As always, we thank you for supporting free and independent media. And I'll be back with another episode of Dragonology very soon. Take care and thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Humanity has been on an epic journey of discovery, learning the truth about the world we live in. New discoveries about the true origins of humanity, ancient history, free energy, as well as the systematic corruption of world governments are now on the forefront of our daily reality. Is the world headed towards destruction based on control and power? Or is an opportunity now being presented to shift and uplift into a higher consciousness? My name is Mel V, co-founder and creative director of Conscious Consumer Network, an independent broadcast network that was launched on the 1st of January 2015. In the last 3 years, Conscious Consumer Network has broadcast over 2,800 shows in multiple languages, featuring guests from across the world, whilst creating media that is aimed at the creation of a free, fair, peaceful, just, sustainable world. Conscious Consumer Network provides full training and an interactive support network for all broadcasters, and we are always looking for inspiring and educational content.
Hi, this is Lainey Liberty.
And this is Miro Siegel.
In 2018, Conscious Consumer Network has expanded to multiple broadcast locations, increasing our availability and reach across the world, remaining on the cutting edge of independent media. If we wish to create a better world, we must first create better media, geared towards real education instead of indoctrination.
You guys really are what changing the world is going to be about. It's educating kids at a grassroots level.
Having become a pillar of stability in the turbulent world of independent media, we have even more going on in 2018. Conscious Consumer Network is a publicly funded network, and we rely on all of you to keep us on the air. Show your support for independent media by donating to our 2018 Network Support Fund. Dare to seek a better world. Support independent media.